I never wanted to be a trucker, but life just has a way of steering you down paths you never expected to travel. My father was a trucker. Third generation, actually. He'd disappear for weeks at a time, leaving Mom and me in our small Minnesota town. I still remember the sound of his Peterbilt rumbling up our gravel driveway at dawn, how the house would shake slightly, and how I'd pretend to be asleep when he'd peek into my room. Growing up, I promised myself I'd never follow in his footsteps. I went to college, got my degree in business administration, landed a comfortable office job in Minneapolis. Life was good, predictable. Natasha and I had just gotten engaged and we were planning our wedding for the following spring. But then 2008 hit. The recession swept through like a tornado, taking my job, our savings, and eventually Natasha too. Losing her was the most painful experience of my life. As if that was not enough, my dad passed away that same year, jackknifed on an icy stretch of I-90. The insurance money barely covered the funeral. Mum, already battling early onset dementia, needed full-time care we couldn't afford. That's when Bobby, Dad's old trucking buddy, offered me a lifeline. He'd help me get my CDL, teach me the ropes, give me steady work with his small fleet. "Your father would have wanted this," he said, standing beside Dad's grave. "The road's in your blood, Stephen, whether you like it or not." The first few years were rough, but Bobby was right. I took to it naturally. The solitude that once terrified me became comforting. I developed my own routines, my own superstitions. Never start a haul on a Tuesday. Always keep a St. Christopher medal in the cab. Never pick up hitchhikers after sunset. Simple rules that kept me safe, kept me sane. By 2015, I was doing well enough to help pay for Mum's care and even start saving again. I had my regular routes, my favorite truck stops, my circle of road friends I'd meet up with every few weeks. Life had found its rhythm. That's when I met Tina at the Flying J in Billings. She was working the night shift, always had a fresh pot of coffee waiting when I'd roll in around 2 a.m. We'd talk while I ate my usual meatloaf and mashed potatoes. She was putting herself through nursing school, raising a kid on her own. Something about her reminded me of Natasha, but softer, more weathered by life's storms. It was Tina who first told me about the disappearances. 3 truckers in 2 months, all along the same stretch of Highway 212. The police called them runaways, but Tina knew better. She'd heard their last radio transmissions, seen the fear in their eyes during their final stops. "Something's out there, Stephen," she'd whispered one night, her hand trembling as she poured my coffee. "Something's hunting on that road." I dismissed her warnings at first. 20 years on the road teaches you that most ghost stories are just that, stories. But then Bobby disappeared. His truck was found abandoned at a rest stop near Crow Agency, engine still running, his logbook open to his final entry. The police found nothing. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. Just another runaway, they said. But I knew Bobby. He'd never abandon his rig, never leave without a word. He had 3 grandkids he doted on, a wife of 40 years. The Bobby I knew wouldn't just vanish into thin air. I started asking questions, digging into the other disappearances. Tina helped, connecting me with other drivers who'd had strange experiences on that stretch of road, but are lucky to survive it. The stories varied, but certain details kept repeating. Mysterious lights, unexplained radio interference, the feeling of being followed by something just out of sight. God, it's all becoming real. All I have long disputed are gathering as reality. The fact that this incident happened to someone I called a family, Bobby, I can't let it slide. Eventually, my curiosity led me to take that fatal route on October 13th, 2015. Against all my rules, against Tina's tearful pleading, I decided to haul a load down Highway 212. I had to know what happened to Bobby, had to find answers to the questions that kept me awake at night. The sun was setting as I pulled out of Billings, my truck heavy with a load of industrial equipment bound for Belforche. Tina had pressed her St. Christopher medal into my palm before I left, making me promise to turn back at the first sign of trouble. I kept it clutched in my left hand as I drove, my right hand steady on the wheel. Little did I know, as the darkness gathered around my truck like a shroud, that this would be the beginning of the longest night of my life. A night that would challenge everything I believed about reality, about survival, about the thin line between sanity and madness. A night that would reveal the true horrors lurking in the shadows of America's lonely highways. The first few hours were uneventful. The familiar hum of my Peterbilt's engine and the gentle sway of the cab had almost lulled me into a false sense of security. Bobby's old CB radio, which I'd installed in my truck after his disappearance, crackled occasionally with distant chatter. Truckers warning each other about speed traps or sharing stories to stay awake. Honestly, it's better not to be aware of dread. I was overly conscious as I drive, looking through my mirror every now and then, as if I'm actually expecting something bad to happen. Around midnight, I passed the last major truck stop before the notorious stretch of highway. The parking lot was unusually empty for this time of night. Only 2 rigs were parked there, both dark and silent. Something about their emptiness made my stomach turn. I thought about pulling in, maybe waiting until dawn, but Bobby's face kept flashing in my mind. What if he'd had the same thought, the same hesitation? What if stopping was exactly what it wanted? The moon was full that night, casting an eerie silver glow over the landscape. The Crow Reservation stretched out on either side of the highway, miles of open prairie dotted with shadowy buttes. Local legends say these lands are sacred, that ancient spirits still roam here, guarding old secrets. I'd always respected these beliefs from a distance, but that night they felt uncomfortably real. The whole experience and atmosphere had my faith shaken that night, honestly. At 1:17 a.m., I remember the time exactly because my digital dashboard clock froze at that moment. The CB radio suddenly came alive with a burst of static. Through the white noise, I heard something that almost ran me crazy. It was Bobby's voice, exactly how he used to talk. No difference. "Stephen, turn around, son. Don't let them take you too." I nearly swerved off the road. Bobby's voice, it was impossible, yet I knew it was him. I'd recognize that gravelly drawl anywhere. My hands shook as I grabbed the radio mic. "Bobby? Bobby, is that you? Where are you?" Only static answered. Then slowly, the static began to change, transforming into something that sounded almost like singing, a low, melodic chant in a language I didn't recognize. The dashboard lights began to flicker, and my engine's steady rumble became erratic. I terribly terrified at that moment, scared and teary at the same time. In the midst of my struggle with fright and tears, that's when I glanced them in my side mirror. Headlights. They seemed to materialize out of nowhere, appearing far behind me on the empty highway. Something about their placement looked wrong. They were too high off the ground, and the light they cast was too blue, too cold. My fear increased. Without a second thought, I pressed down on the accelerator, but my truck responded sluggishly. The engine coughed and sputtered, struggling to keep pace. Before I even realized it, I had wet myself, my pants damp in an instant. The headlights drew closer, but no vehicle was visible in my mirrors, just those floating ice blue lights. My radio crackled again. This time it was Tina's voice. "Stephen, can you hear me? They're coming for you, just like they came for the others. Don't look back. Whatever you do, please, Stephen, don't look back." I gripped Bobby's St. Christopher medal so hard it cut into my palm. The temperature in the cab plummeted. I could see my breath forming clouds in the air. The headlights were getting closer, and with them came a sound, a deep, thrumming vibration that I could feel in my bones. Ahead, the highway stretched endlessly into darkness, but something was wrong with the road. The white lines were moving, shifting like living things. They began to twist and curl, forming patterns that hurt my eyes to look at. Reality seemed to be bending, warping around my truck. Then I saw her, a figure standing in the middle of the road, illuminated by my headlights. It was my girlfriend, Natasha, looking exactly as she had the day she left me. But her eyes were wrong. They reflected the light like a cat's, glowing with that same ice blue color as the pursuing headlights. I had a split-second decision to make. The rational part of my brain screamed that this couldn't be real, that Natasha couldn't be here. But another part, a deeper, more primitive part, recognized something ancient and terrible in those glowing eyes. Something that had been hunting on this road long before the first truck engine ever roared across these lands. My hands moved on instinct, yanking the wheel hard to the right. 15 tons of truck and cargo lurched sideways, tires screaming against asphalt. The figure that looked like Natasha didn't move, didn't even flinch. As my truck barreled through her form, she simply dissolved, like smoke in the wind. At the sight of this, I'm really losing my sanity. Then my CB radio erupted in a cacophony of voices, dozens of them, overlapping. Some I recognized, others foreign and distorted. Bobby's voice rose above the others. They feed on fear, Stephen. Been doing it for centuries. Truckers, travelers, anyone alone on these roads. The lights, they're not following you. They're herding you. Herding me. Why? I said to myself as I was trying to interpret what he meant. Then my eyes darted to the mirror again. The blue headlights had multiplied, forming a semicircle behind my truck. They were closer now, close enough that I could see they weren't attached to any vehicle. They floated freely, pulsing with an internal rhythm that matched the thrumming in my bones. "Tina!" I screamed into the radio. "Tina, if you can hear me, call someone, anyone!" But I knew it was useless. Whatever these things were, they had isolated me completely. I was alone out here, just like Bobby had been, just like all the others. The temperature dropped even further. Ice began forming on my windshield, creating intricate patterns that seemed to move and shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. The engine coughed once, twice, then died completely. My truck rolled to a stop in the middle of the highway, surrounded by absolute darkness except for those hovering blue lights. That moment I knew I was done for. This is the end, I mustered to myself with tears. As I was waiting for the next thing to happen, I remembered something. A story Tina had told me months ago. Something she'd heard from an old Crow elder who frequented the truck stop. He'd spoken of ancient spirits that hunted on these lands, entities that fed not just on fear, but on the moment of absolute despair when hope dies. They can only take you, the elder had said, when you give up. The lights were closing in now. Through my frosted windshield, I could make out shapes moving within them, twisted, elongated forms that hurt my mind to look at. The radio voices had merged into a single droning chant. My door handles began to rattle. In that moment of terror, I felt my grip on Bobby's St. Christopher medal loosen. As it started to slip from my blood-slick palm, something snapped inside me. Bobby hadn't given up. Even in his final transmission, he'd tried to warn me. Tina hadn't given up. She was still fighting, still trying to uncover the truth. And I wouldn't give up either. I clutched the medal tight, closed my eyes and began to pray, not just to St. Christopher, but to whatever forces might be listening. The chanting on the radio grew louder, more insistent. My truck rocked violently and I could hear something scratching at the cab doors, trying to get in. Then, cutting through the chaos like a knife, came another sound, a horn, long and loud and beautifully, wonderfully human. My eyes snapped open to see headlights approaching from the opposite direction. Normal, yellow-white headlights. The blue lights scattered like startled birds retreating into the darkness. The approaching vehicle was another truck, and at its wheel was an elderly Native American man. He pulled up alongside me, rolled down his window, and spoke 5 words that I'll never forget. They can't take what's protected. The next thing I knew, it was dawn. I was parked at the Flying J in Billings, my truck running smoothly as if nothing had happened. Tina was there, tears streaming down her face as she ran to my cab. According to her, I'd been missing for 3 days. They never found Bobby, or any of the other missing truckers. The police report lists my experience as a stress-induced blackout, a common enough occurrence in long-haul drivers, but Tina and I know better. We've made it our mission to warn others, to help them protect themselves. The old crow man who saved me. No one at the truck stop had ever seen or heard of him, but his words stayed with me. They can't take what's protected. These days I keep Bobby's St. Christopher medal permanently fixed to my dash. I never drive that stretch of Highway 212 anymore. But sometimes on long dark nights I still catch glimpses of ice blue lights in my mirror. And when I do, I hold tight to what protects me. Not just the medal, but the memory of those who fought before me, and the knowledge that as long as we keep fighting, keep warning others, keep believing, the darkness can never truly win. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything to me. I'll be back with another story soon. Take care and bye for now.